I had a good friend, a mentor, who really opened my eyes to the concept of allowing myself the freedom to fail at things in order to get better at doing them. And I've spent a lot of my life being a kook, and it's okay to be a kook sometimes. Don't worry about it, because if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong place, man.
I'm Justin Jay, and this is The Plug. In the recently released book, Surfer Stories, 12 acclaimed writers profile 12 of the world's greatest surfers. Today's guest is one of the most revered figures in surfing history. His impact on the sport and its culture runs so deep that he appears in the book not only as a subject of a story, but also as a contributor. It's a testament to both his stature and his gift for storytelling. Just as Babe Ruth will forever be linked to Yankee Stadium, Gerry Lopez is synonymous with Hawaii's Banzai Pipeline. Though he wasn't the first to surf this iconic break, his elegance and singular style while riding one of the most dangerous waves on the planet redefined what it meant to ride pipeline. With a graceful, almost meditative approach to barrel riding, he made an indelible mark in the lineup. But his life beyond the water is equally compelling. As a trailblazer in board design, a pioneer of remote surf breaks, and a lifelong student of yoga, Gerry embodied what it meant to be a soul surfer, long before it became a cliche. And while this journey may have seemed effortless, he's weathered his fair share of challenges. So how does he view his legacy? And what motivated him to sign a deal to sell low-cost signature soft tops to the masses at Costco? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat with the man that made the lightning bolt logo ubiquitous on the North Shore. Today, surfer, shaper, snowboarder, and writer, Mr. Pipeline, Gerry Lopez. We have a very special show today. I'm really thrilled to get a chance to chat with Mr. Pipeline himself, Mr. Gerry Lopez. Gerry, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down. It's a pleasure to see you, and I'm really excited to get to chat today. So thanks for doing this.
Well, you're very welcome, Justin. Thank you, Claudia, for making all this happen.
So we're also joined today by Claudia Lebenthal, and she is the editor and producer of a wonderful new book that Gerry just contributed to called Surfer Stories. And it's a collection of 12 stories by 12 acclaimed writers about 12 of the most amazing surfers ever. So Claudia, thanks for joining us. Gerry, I'm going to throw it to you first. I was definitely aware of the articles that you'd written for Surfer Magazine over the years, and I really enjoyed reading your book that you published a while back called Surf is Where You Find It. But what I learned in this book that I didn't know is that you actually had your own newspaper column in Honolulu in the late 60s and early 70s. And you're a talented writer.
Well, my dad was a newspaper man, and he got me that gig, and it was actually pretty fun. And yeah, we did it for a couple of years, and it was a great time. You know, it was nice to have that little credential.
So, I mean, you are one of only two surfers in this book that both wrote a story, but also had a profile written about them. Sean Thompson was the other one. Did you find it more difficult to be the subject of one of these stories or to be the writer and kind of have the responsibility of shaping the narrative and in some way writing history about another surfer, in this case, Garrett McNamara? Like, which of those experiences as a writer or subject, which gave you more pause or left you feeling more exposed?
I think being a writer, because, you know, once you write it, it's forever, and you don't want to blow it and make any mistakes. And, you know, I've known Garrett for a long time, and we did a lot of back and forth to make sure everything was correct and you know, what he wanted as well. And I thought the story, I mean, it's just a brief slice of his life, but I think it's a pretty clear picture of the person that he is.
So you were a little bit more nervous about having to tell his story and make sure that you got it right, as opposed to revealing stuff about your life, which to some degree, a lot of people have had a chance to do over the years.
Yes, yeah, definitely being a writer was much more on the spot.
And what's his response been from the story? Was he happy with how it turned out?
Oh yeah, he's over the moon. He's talking about, can we do a book promotion here or there? And I'm going, okay, whatever you want to do.
And was that enthusiasm, was that consistent with his attitude when you told him or asked him that you were going to write about him for the story? I mean, was he reticent at the beginning, or was he always enthusiastic about kind of having that attention and having that profile written about him?
Oh no. I mean, he's been over the moon on this whole project from the very beginning. And, it made my job as a writer a lot easier to have all that cooperation from him. But he is a person that has a lot of enthusiasm for pretty much anything that he gets into.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to Garrett in a second, but Claudia, I want to ask you about, you put together just an incredible roster of surfers and writers for this project. Jamie Brisick, who's a good friend of mine, wonderful writer, wrote a story. Selema Masekela wrote a really personal piece about Mikey February that tackles themes of race and apartheid and talks about his experiences with his father growing up. And my high school buddy, Chris Shiflett, wrote one of my favorite stories in the book about Santa Barbara hero Tom Curran. There's a little something for everyone in this book, and there's a lot of heart in this book. And I'm wondering, why was it important for you to have Gerry play such a large part in this book?
Well, I wanted to have really a diverse group of writers and a diverse group of surfers. And I knew that I wanted to have some surfers writing about surfers. And I knew Gerry. I had actually interviewed Gerry. I don't know if you remember that, Gerry, when your book came out. And I had his email. So, and I had Sean Thompson's email. So it was like, well, I know these two. I can reach out to these surfers. But Gerry, what I adore about Gerry is he's a man of little words, but yet when it comes to writing, it's this action-packed. You are on the wave. You are in it. So his writing style is so action-packed, where he is so zen in the rest of his life. But I left it to the writers, because they're far more than 12 great surfers, to say who they wanted to write about. And Gerry said, "Well, can I write about Garrett McNamara?" It's like, yeah, of course. So he had a great relationship. They were friends. But I'm learning so much about the behind the scenes right now, listening to Gerry and the exchange that he and Garrett had. So Gerry's was the first piece to come in and wowed me from the start.
Was it harder or more difficult to lock in Gerry Lopez or the notoriously reclusive Tom Curran?
The notoriously reclusive Tom Curran, who I did not know until Chris Shiflett said, "I want to write about Tom Curran," was notoriously elusive. No wonder Chris Shiflett sort of like, "Yeah, I'll do it if you can get me Tom Curran." I was like, oh, okay. I am naive. I am... that can't be that hard. Ha, 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 ha. But, you just referenced some of the writers in the book who really were ambassadors for me. Jamie Brisick, Selema, they said, "We're not going to give you his email, but you write it and we'll send it to him." And amazingly, they did. And I will say, so when I went back to Chris Shiflett and I said, "Well, okay, I got him. And not only are you going to get to interview him, but he's going to take you surfing." So I feel like, okay, I met the challenge and took it up to the next level. So it was pretty exciting.
You found the J.D. Salinger of surfing and got him to write a profile.
I did. I mean, I can't even believe it. It's really kind of, as I look and I hold this book, I'm like, how the heck did this happen? I mean, I have this idea, but I will say I've been so overwhelmed by the kindness and enthusiasm of everyone. I mean, Gerry, I said, "Do you want to write a story?" And the man of little words said, "Yes."
He was a quick yes.
I was like, well, that was weirdly easy. Okay. He was a quick yes, which was wonderful. I was like, wow.
A story behind that as well, because while you and I were interacting on this and, you sent me a list of the possible subjects that you're interested in. It just so happened that Garrett and his family had just texted me because it was the first time he had come here where I live here in Bend, Oregon, to go snowboarding. And I went, well, this is serendipitous. I mean, maybe I should write about Garrett. And, I asked him that day, I said, hey, this thing came up and are you interested? And he looked at me and, immediately enveloped me in a big hug and said, let's do this.
Oh, man.
That's kind of how that happened and, why I chose Garrett. So,
well, all the writers in this book seem to have a really personal connection to the surfers that they profile. And, you chose Garrett McNamara. And, the non-surfers might recognize his name from the HBO series, The 100-Foot Wave. But, what struck me as really unique about that is that, I can't really think of two other surfers that are as inextricably linked to specific surf breaks as the two of you. Gerry Lopez is synonymous with Pipeline. And then especially since the HBO series, Garrett with Nazare. And, was that mutual connection with these two surf breaks? Was that something that was on your mind when you chose to write about him? Why did you choose Garrett in the end?
Well, I chose Garrett because he was right there and I could talk.
But I want to put you on the spot. You're Gerry Lopez. I would assume that you're in a position to relatively have access to anybody that you could choose to write about. What made you want to bring Garrett into this picture?
Well, I've known him for a long time, since him and his brother were very young. I made surfboards for them for a lot of years. And there was a lot that I didn't know about him that I discovered once we started doing this piece. And it was shocking, really, that the life he had. We didn't talk about it that much in this story, but it was really interesting to understand the background that he came from and, where he is today. I thought my life was tough. My life was easy compared to his.
Yeah, I think that's one of the aspects of your profile about him that I found most interesting is it really didn't gloss over the fact that he had originally really wanted to just take the traditional path of pro surfer, and he didn't have it. It wasn't in his constitution to be that type of professional surfer, and that he overcame these odds and then found this really unique lane for himself. I think that's a really interesting angle.
Yeah, very interesting, because it's much like how many kids grow up, myself, playing baseball and, at some point maybe aspire to get better and better at it and think, wow, maybe I could make the major leagues. But how few of them actually do, even though that dream stays with them, until they suddenly understand and realize that that's never going to happen. Garrett he never gave up. He just kept paddling and, he got caught inside by one set after another and he got pounded and beat back to shore and he just got back on his board and kept paddling.
Yeah.
And I think that really tells the whole story about what kind of surfer he is.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful title for the story, Keep Paddling, because it works, you talk about it on two different levels. It's very sage advice on a literal level to somebody who's caught inside surfing, but it's also like a great metaphor for, perseverance. And you tied it together really, really well in that story. But there's one other thing that struck me about that story that I find really ironic of you choosing to write about Garrett, in that, Pipeline is one of the most crowded and competitive surf breaks in the world. Like so much so that at some point you were kind of over it and you went to explore more remote waves, in Indonesia and G-Land. And if you look at Nazare, it was relatively undeveloped as a surf break until very recently. And, the community of Portugal and Garrett, a surfer, were really the people who kind of put it on the map, which is unheard of in surfing. Waves are really viewed as this finite resource. And there's a lot of breaks in Hawaii that you can't even shoot pictures of, let alone work with the Chamber of Commerce to advertise. Did you see the irony in that when you were writing about Garrett about this piece?
Actually, now that you pointed out, I really do see that, because when I started surfing the Pipeline, it was much like when Garrett started at Nazare. There was no one there and nobody was that interested. And he was just doing his own thing. And that's what created the whole, everything about Nazare being the biggest wave in the world. For me, it was the same at the pipeline. Nobody was interested in the pipeline when I started being very interested in it. And it just kind of happened while I was there. And I think with Garrett, it wasn't that he was specifically trying to promote himself. He just wanted to surf that big wave. And all of that happened while he was in the process of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the closest parallel would be something like, even Jeff Clark at Mavericks, who, for the most part, him and a couple of friends had it to themselves for close to a decade, but when it finally did blow up and come on everyone's radar, it wasn't at the behest of Jeff and his friends. It kind of just happened naturally. I mean, like Garrett was almost solely responsible for putting Nazare on the map. Would you agree?
I would agree, yes.
Yeah. So there's a great section in your book where you tell a story about when Garrett was filming the HBO series. There was these TV executives that really wanted him to lean into developing this character of him as this imposing big wave hellman. And you talk about how on the North Shore, that type of self-aggrandizing and boasting is really frowned upon. And, there's almost this notion that if you're truly the man, like other people will say it on your behalf. You don't have to say it yourself. And I think one of the reasons why there's this kind of mystique around Mr. Pipeline, Gerry Lopez, is that, you often really did let your surfing speak for you. But, to a young pro surfer today trying to make it and trying to make a living, being incredibly gifted at surfing is not enough. I mean, you really have to go on social media and you have to promote yourself and you have to toot your own horn. Do you think that if you came up today that you would be able to have the same career path? I mean, do you have it in your constitution to be the guy online saying, hey guys, don't forget to smash the like button? I mean, because I don't personally, and I think sometimes, this podcast suffers as a result. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Well, reading Jim's Kempton story that he wrote about me, it made me open my eyes a little bit too, because no, I absolutely don't think that I would have had the same path in my career that happened kind of on its own if it was today. It's a different world today, and surfing has grown so much and become, I guess, just a bigger sport. And yeah, I don't think I would have made it in today's world.
Yeah.
Because that, I'm like Garrett was. I was not the kind of guy that, and if I did toot my own horn, some of my pals just, slapped me down and said, no, don't do that.
Yeah. Did you find a similar experience working with Gerry on this project, Claudia?
As I say, he's very humble and he was very easy to work with. I found he took edits. I'm so sensitive when someone's editing my work, and not so. When I would send back edits, it's like, I think it's great, I love it. Would you just think about? And either he'd say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't. But inevitably, I think we crafted a beautiful story together. But interestingly, as I had to do with Sean Thompson as well, I said, please insert something about yourself, who you are and your accomplishments. And Gerry was reticent. I was like, you're Mr. Pipeline. Say you're Mr. Pipeline. And he was reticent, but I think people want to know that. This is a legend talking about another legend. And I think for people, whether you're in the surf community or not, and maybe even more so if you're not, it's like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And it was the same with Sean. I had to encourage him as well, to say, hey, talk about your accomplishments and then share about Kelly. So I think it is a surfer thing. I have so much respect for people that are humble. I try to be. But yeah, sometimes you got to toot your own horn.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, one of the main themes of Jim's profile about you, Gerry, is this contrast between the public persona that people associate with you and the reality of who you really are. And I think a lot of people have watched you surf and they assume that this kind of Zen-like, unflappable approach to riding waves defines all aspects of your life. But, in your profile, you even joke about how you've kind of had to make amends to people over the years for all the waves that you've burned, and there's this great quote. It might be by Rory Russell, I'm not sure, but the quote's, "It wasn't like Gerry was just the nicest guy in the lineup, somehow ending up with all the best waves by accident." And I guess I'm wondering, what accounts for the disconnect between this reasonable amount of human flaws that you have and this kind of near mythic image of you of this smiling guru at Pipeline? I mean, do you feel that somehow you've actively helped cultivate that personality, or do you think it really speaks more to people's just propensity to hero worship?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in Hawaii, that, if you had the thought that you were a surf star, all your friends would just boo and hiss. And so I grew up with that. And it was part of that whole process that as I gained more recognition, that I didn't really want it, because you didn't want to be a surf star in Hawaii. All your friends would just kind of, throw stuff at you and go, no, we don't want to hang around with you anymore. So,
yeah. And I think the events surrounding the Bustin' Down the Doors movie is kind of testament to what happens when you don't act like that, I guess.
Yeah. And, that's just part of the whole surfing growing into from what it was when I started to what it is today. And it's, it was, really a natural process, but, it had to go through all these little ups and downs, and you got to just flow with that.
Yeah. Well, how, especially, looking back at this point in your life, how are you comfortable with the term Mr. Pipeline? Are you okay with the kind of myth surrounding Gerry Lopez, or is it something that always makes you feel uncomfortable?
No, I think I just set it aside. It's not me. It's not even part of me. It's just something that other people like to say about me. And I kind of laugh about it. And, with my close friends, we laugh about it together because they know who I am and they know I'm not really that thing that, gets built up.
Yeah, it's really, I guess a similar situation. I've spent a lot of time with Kelly Slater and some of his best friends, like Ross and Benji Weatherly, and the reverence that most people show towards Kelly Slater. Those guys really have such a close relationship that they're comfortable getting under his skin, and like they're one of the few people that they'll rib Kelly and they'll make fun of him and they'll put him in check. And not many people do that, and it's charming to see that relationship,
And I think he enjoys that, because he gets the other side of that so much that it's too much. And, like for me, when I first moved here to Central Oregon, when I started getting interested in snowboarding, we decided that we wanted to live here. And it was really great because all my son's friends in school, we met all the parents, and I was just my son's dad. They didn't know who I was. Surfing, this is the middle of Oregon. It's not near the ocean. They didn't know about surfing. They didn't know about me. They just said, oh, yeah, he's Alex's dad. And that was really perfectly fine with me. I like that.
It was refreshing. Yeah. Well, there's a reference in the book about the classic surf film 5 Summer Stories, and I think it mentions that you have close to like a dozen waves in that movie. But what it doesn't show is the countless beatings that you took at Pipe, like filming those waves. Probably more than anybody at the time. And if you take a modern surfer, let's say Dane Reynolds, for example, like he's really revered as a real surfer's surfer. And I think in part because he includes wipeouts and a lot of non-makes in his edits. And I think people really appreciate that honesty. And I'm just wondering, like, if you had been more involved in the editing of some of your classic sessions, Would you have included more carnage and wipeouts? I mean, do you think the process matters, or is it more about showing the final product?
I embrace the process, and I certainly would have showed a lot more of those wipeouts, because the wipeouts, in a way, are even more spectacular than the rides that you make.
Absolutely.
And, especially at someplace like the pipeline, where you can see it in such vivid close-up detail. You just, it's scary. And it's scary to me, even though I was the guy, tumbling down the face. But yeah, no, I definitely would have included the wipeouts too.
Yeah, we always joke with friends, but there a lot of people look at magazine covers of women and talk about this false body image that it portrays. And I feel like a lot of times surf movies really portray a false surf image. It's like they never show missed flights or getting skunked or getting robbed or just getting injured. It's a very specific set of context that they show.
I have this picture of me that a French friend, a great photographer, Sylvain Cazeneuve, took when we were first starting to surf at Jaws there. And Laird was out in the water, and he was on the rope, and I was on the rope, and it looked like a set was coming. And, here comes the first big one that we see. And Laird goes, "Hey," because we were further out, "you guys see anything bigger outside?" We go, "No, this looks like the one." So he catches the wave, and then, we go over a couple more swells, and suddenly there's the biggest wave that's ever come in since, we were surfing Jaws. And I'm looking at it. I'm the only one in position. And my driver whips me into the wave, and I start to look at the drop, and it's at least a 50-foot wave, the biggest wave I've ever been in a position to ride. And I looked at the thing, and I just went, nah, not me. And the pictures of me pulling off the wave instead of dropping into it. And, Laird was livid when he came, when he saw the wave, and he goes, "Why did you tell me that was coming? We never saw it." But I've always loved that picture. And just because, it showed maybe some good sense.
And truth.
In my case.
Yeah. So, I mean, you started practicing yoga pretty early in your career. And you talk about how yoga speaks to your spirituality, your fitness, your health, your center of mind. But, you're also referenced in this story as being very calculating and shrewd in business and kind of ruthless in the lineup. And, the story recounts the rise and fall of Lightning Bolt and how you seem to really have this impeccable timing to know just when to get out and sell your shares. And I'm just wondering, was there ever a conflict between the philosophies of non-harming and non-attachment that you studied in yoga with what it takes to be a successful businessman or to get a set wave at Pipeline?
I think that's just the normal yin and yang of everyone, and everything in life, that, you bounce between one and the other. I mean, health and harmony obviously is created when yin and yang are in balance, but it's when you move away from the center that you realize that, okay, I'm going one way or the other, and eventually I got to think about getting back to that tranquility that you find there.
So I guess the philosophies of yoga are the ideals, but living in the real world, it's difficult to always put those in practice 100%.
Well, I think that the philosophies incorporate the fact that, you're going to stray from the center, and you're going to go be a little yang on one occasion, and then, maybe a little too yin on the next one. And that's the way of it. And you just kind of have to, like you learn in surfing, okay, just go with the flow.
Yeah. So there's a in Jim's story, it really highlights how when Lightning Bolt was first getting started, you guys came up with this, at the time, groundbreaking idea, and you gave free Lightning Bolt boards to basically every top surfer on the North Shore. And in turn, that Lightning Bolt logo just dominated the pages of all the magazines that season. But if you fast forward to today, a quiver of free boards has kind of become the foundation of the relationship between most pro surfers and their shapers. Like there usually isn't a lot of money exchanged, but those free boards are like a very common marketing practice. Were you guys really the first to do that? I mean, did that seem radical or out of the box at the time?
No, I mean, all the surfboard companies, which was basically the only surf industry back in the beginning there, had team riders, and those team riders were not paying for their boards. Of course, you didn't have that many surfboards back in the 60s. And, what happened was that these guys were really great surfers coming from South Africa or Australia, even California, the East Coast, wherever. The surfboards that they were building to come ride the waves in Hawaii were built, in their homes, and they weren't, it's like the Zen macrobiotic, you want to eat the food that's grown where you live. And our surfboards were just a little better suited because we're making them there in Hawaii for the waves in Hawaii. And, when we offered them the boards, they jumped at the chance. And these guys are really great surfers, and just like you said, you open the magazine and, all the pages are filled with guys riding our lightning bolt boards. And they were, for the most part, very respectful of the fact that we were giving them these boards. And then we would hang on to the boards during the summer months, the off season. And when they came back the next winter, the boards were there, and, they were very happy to ride them.
So you guys were able to kind of achieve that saturation, not just because it was such a novel idea, but just because you had the most appropriate, best shaped equipment for that break at the time?
I think that was it entirely. Yeah. We had boards that were made there in Hawaii for the waves. And the guys that were making the boards understood and knew that their boards were very, very ideally suited for the waves there.
So, this book, it touches a lot on your choices over the years to really lean into self-reinvention and this theme of being a pioneer, like pioneering new equipment to ride deeper barrels at Pipeline, pioneering new surf spots like G-Land. I mean, you fell in love with snowboarding at some point and you devoted your life to that and moved to Oregon. You kite surf, you foil, you ride motorcycles. And, we had Stacy Peralta on the podcast recently, and he directed a really wonderful documentary about you a few years ago. And one of the things that the two of us discussed on our talk is that he has this conscious choice to continually try and put himself in a position where he isn't an expert at something, and then he's forced to be a beginner. And he had this great quote about himself. It says, "It's really dangerous to get good at something because when you do, you sometimes can prevent yourself from learning new things because you don't want to go backwards and put yourself in that kook phase." And he feels that there's great value in that challenge and the sense of uneasiness and the growth and inspiration that brings ultimately. And I see a lot of parallels between that philosophy and the life path that you've chosen. I mean, do you agree with that? Is that a fair comparison?
Totally. Absolutely. I had a good friend, a mentor, older surfer, who really opened my eyes to the concept of allowing myself the freedom to fail at things in order to learn how to do them and, get better at doing them. And if you didn't allow that to happen, then, either you were going to get too frustrated and just quit, or you weren't going to learn anything. And so that was something that really became easy for me to be a kook, when I wanted to try these things that I thought were really interesting. And I've spent a lot of my life being a kook. And, I like to tell people that it's okay to be a kook sometimes. Don't worry about it, because if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong place, man.
But it's funny you use that word because, I specifically asked Stacy about that word too, because, growing up as a surfer, that's really maybe the single worst thing that someone could ever accuse you of being. And it's so ironic that, Gerry Lopez and Stacy Peralta, with your stature, are two people that they lean into and they're okay with identifying as being a kook. I find that really interesting.
It's okay to be a kook.
There's the pull quote right there. What are your thoughts on that, Claudia?
Well, first of all, I love that word so much. It just, it to me, not being in that, it's just a great word. Like, you're a kook, you don't take it too seriously. So if someone would call me a kook, unless they thought I was really a crazy person, I'd be like, yeah, I am a little bit of a kook. I do things differently. I enjoy things. Maybe I'm not taking the traditional path. So, but I think this is fascinating because I'm learning so much, Gerry, as we're talking. But I think, yeah, that not being afraid to fail. We all have to do that. We all get very complacent. And, I think even with this book, like, sometimes I don't realize, like, oh my God, I'm getting myself into a situation that is kind of over my head. But okay, I'm in it. I'm actually going to give you a great metaphor that I learned on the ski slopes. I was in Crested Butte, Colorado. Gerry, I don't know if you've ever been there or Justin there, but the whole backside of the mountain is extreme terrain. And I'd been back there, I'd skied back there, but always with a guide or a friend, and so it was fine. But one day I'm there with my family and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go up there. It'll be fine. So I go up and it's like just a rickety little lift that gets you up there. And I'm looking and I'm sort of going all along the ridge going, no, next one, no, next one. And I get to the end and I'm like, oh no, I'm out of options. I gotta go down this one. So skiing down a few things and then I'm like, oh, I am not in a good spot. It's like I see rocks, I see a cliff, but I'm staying relatively calm. And I was like, okay, someone's going to come down here. I'm looking out, but I see these two telemarkers. I'm like, okay, telemarkers, they're the real deal, especially on that part of the mountain. They stopped by me and I said, hi, this is a little above my level. And the guy said to me, and I call him a wise stoner, said, well, you're skiing it. It's your level now. So I've sort of taken that, like, put yourself in a situation, if it looks like, just wait for someone, get advice. But once you're in it, it's your level. So you have to commit. So I think that's part of it.
Well, Gerry, I want to get your thought on, you think that's sage advice from the wise stoner, or do you think that there's more to surfing pipe than a mindset?
Well, actually, what I think is that this book, because listening to you, Justin, obviously you've read my story and the story about Garrett very closely because you pointed out quite a few things. This is a book that people are going to read once, they're going to think about it, and then they're going to read it again. And I've already read it twice just because, I wanted to be prepared for this podcast. But I think this is a book that people are going to read many times over the years because there's so many things in here about so many great people, written by so many great people that are so profound and interesting that a lot of those things are going to stay with the people and go, oh, I got to read about that again. And I think this is a book that's going to be reread many times over the years by a lot of people.
Wow. And that speaks highly to you, Claudia.
Thank you. That means the world to me.
It's really an interesting book. And I thought about which is my favorite story. And, in first reading, it was Sean's story about Kelly. And then I started thinking about all of them and I went, they're all really good, and they're all really interesting and they're all really different too, which really makes it great.
It's a very varied book. And I love that they're digestible too. There aren't 10,000 word stories, they're it's something you can read in bed and feel like you've gotten it,
Yeah.
So Gerry, I want to get your thoughts real quick on the pipe house that you built on the North Shore, because, it's become such an iconic house in the history of pipeline. And I find it so remarkable that you were able to build, your castle, if you will, like literally in front of the arena that you dominated and the break that kind of solidified your reputation. And I can't really think of another analogous example in sports. I mean, it's not like Tiger Woods ever built a house on the 18th hole of Augusta National. I mean, it's a very unique situation. And I know you don't own that house anymore, but do you still feel very connected to that house? What's your association with that property and Pipeline today?
Oh, there's not really any connection. It's just, life is just, you go through different phases, and that was a great phase at the time. I don't think it would be the same now. And, interestingly, I never lived at that house. I only visited it.
That's a pretty nice pied-à-terre.
Had it been, 10 or 20 years earlier, I certainly would have lived there. But we finished that house in 1980 or so. And by then, the Pipeline was, still a big part of my life, but living on the North Shore wasn't anything that I was really interested in. The only time I really spent any time out there, other than, when I was chasing the swells when the pipe was good, was during the summertime. And especially when my son was born, that was the most beautiful time of year. And the beach was big. The beach was very uncrowded. Nobody was looking for the waves. And it was just, a time in my life that I passed through, and now I'm in another time.
Yeah. I want to get one last input from you about this topic. I recently rewatched the movie Citizen Kane recently, directed and starring the great Orson Welles. And, still to this day, I think it's one of the most brilliantly shot and directed films of all time. But it wasn't really until I was in film class in college that I was exposed to Orson Welles' films and really became aware of just how gifted he was. For me, growing up in the 80s, I didn't know him as this legendary director and actor. I knew him as this old guy on TV commercials that said, "I will sell no wine before it's time," the old Parmesan commercials. And, on that same note, to a kid growing up today who may not have a rich knowledge of surf history, or maybe even an adult who just started surfing during COVID, as sad as it may be, their association with Gerry Lopez might not be of, you surfing Pipeline. It might be the logo on a soft top that they bought at Costco. And I'm wondering, like, how protective or concerned are you about your legacy? Like, how did that Costco deal come about? And did you have any reservations about it at the time?
Well, it's over now, because I didn't have reservations, but a lot of other people did that were close to me. And I felt that, okay, that was another phase in my life that now I've passed through it, and it's okay. When I went into the deal, it was basically a way to make surfing affordable for people that, wanted to try it, but didn't want to spend $1,000 to buy a surfboard and then discover that I don't want to be a surfer. So I thought it was really a good thing going in, but there's a lot of people that think no matter what you do, and especially now with social media, that where they can be, take shots at you anonymously, that I took a lot of flack on that. And that's okay. Everybody's entitled to think what they want, but surfing is a thing that I learned from a lot of my mentors. It's a gift that you get in life, and it's a gift that should be shared in life. And I think that pretty much every surfer at some point in their life discovered that getting a good wave and getting a great ride is really a wonderful thing. But there's something more wonderful when you help someone who's struggling or who has never done it to ride a wave successfully, and you see the joy that they get from that. That comes back to you in spades. And I think that was, my idea going into the Costco deal, and to continue the legacy that Duke Kahanamoku left us, that share this gift of surfing.
It's a rare sport where, the ambassadors of the sport sometimes are not the biggest boosters to get new people to enter the space. You don't find that in a lot of other sports. And so that was really ultimately your incentive, is to expose it to people who didn't have $1,000 to spend.
Well, that's how you make surfing available to people that maybe, okay, I'm not that interested, but it looks interesting, so maybe I'll give it a try. But I don't want to spend a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, it always seems funny whenever I hear people talk about, especially in the summertime, I'll be spending time out at Rockaway here in New York and be like, oh, I think I'm going to try surfing. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's like a lifelong pursuit. That's like saying I'm going to try karate, or, it's like, it's a lifelong pursuit, No one can speak to that better than you.
yeah. All it takes is that first wave, and you see what happens. And that's why the whole thing with these surf pools now is becoming, so much more valid, that it gives people an opportunity to not have to go out in the crowded lineup and try and struggle to stand up on a surfboard. You get a much better chance in a wave pool because everybody knows whose turn it is.
We're getting some very controversial endorsements from Gerry Lopez today: Costco surfboards and wave pools.
Well, that's surfing. Surfing has been evolving in the many years that I've been doing, and it has been just a joy and very, very interesting to see where it continues to go.
Yeah. Well, we always like to end the podcast by asking our guests to plug something that they aren't directly involved in, but they feel isn't getting enough attention. And it could be a book, a movie, a TV show, a social cause, a restaurant. Is there something you want to give a little bit more shine to? And Claudia, I'll let you go first on this one.
Well, yes, and I'll say I'm directly and indirectly involved, but I think it answers the question. Surfrider is our charitable partner in the book, Surfrider Foundation, dedicated to ocean preservation. And as Gerry's chapter sets up so beautifully, talking about how oceans and waves are formed, which is why his story leads off the book, none of this would be possible without clean water, clean oceans, clean beaches, keeping it free of plastic, and somebody, some organization looking out for that. So Surfrider came on my horizon when we started looking for a strategic and charitable partner for the book. It was an obvious choice. And perhaps right now, the timing could not be better with what the current administration is doing in terms of ending any sort of climate agreement or accords. And Surfrider's right there on Capitol Hill lobbying for ocean preservation. And for everyone, surf or not, the ocean is a beautiful thing and everyone loves it, and could not be a more critical cause and something I'm now very passionate about.
Yeah. Gerry, what about you? You have something you want to shout out, just give a little bit more attention to?
I do. Duke Kahanamoku was a big influence to my generation of surfers. And he used to carry a business card like thing that had a picture of him surfing on one side and a beautiful message on the other side. And that message said, "Aloha means love. In Hawaii, we greet friends, loved ones, and strangers with aloha, which means with love. Aloha is the key word to the universal spirit of real hospitality that made Hawaii renowned as the world's center for fellowship and understanding. Try meeting or leaving your brother nobles with aloha, and you will be surprised by their reaction to the aloha of love. I believe it. It is my creed. Aloha to you, Duke." And I always thought that was such a beautiful thing, that aloha is like the word ku, it really has a much bigger meaning than we ever realize. And my yoga guru, Swami Sivananda, says the only basis for true and lasting unity for all humanity is the religion of the heart. And the religion of the heart is the religion of love. So I think that love is something that we all should spend a lot more time thinking about and practicing.
That's a beautiful plug. I love it. Well, Claudia, Gerry, I can't really say anything about you, Gerry, that hasn't already been said before. So I will just say, one more time, thank you for your contributions to the culture, and thank you for being on the podcast. And it was a pleasure and honor to get to sit down and cut it up with you.
Well, likewise, Justin, you're quite a guy. I'm going to be listening to more of your podcasts.
I appreciate it. And Claudia, congrats once again on such a wonderful book. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, listeners, it's called Surfer Stories. It's available now. It's a perfect size. You can read it on the beach. You can read it in bed. Nothing's too heavy. Has a lot of heart, but it's digestible, and it's really worth reading. It's very diverse. There's a little something in there for everybody. So go check it out.
Oh, thank you very much. Awesome.
Thanks, Justin. I'll just add they're great photos too, so you get the whole package. But thank you. It's an honor. Gerry, it was an honor to have you as both, writer and profiled, and it's an honor every time I get to speak and be with you. Truly, thank you, and thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio, logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.